Look at my new mug. It's the Four Little Swans from Swan Lake doing the Four Swans Quartet, and their skeletons with little rose gold crowns. TK Maxx find. Hello my friends and welcome back to my channel. My name is Ragan. We talk about all things fantasy romance here, and today we are doing a recommendation for your fall witchy paranormal TBR. It is August, but we are starting to kind of get in the mood for fall. And if you're like me, you don't do weekly, monthly TBRs, you do kind of like a vibe TBR, a seasonal TBR. And I've started to put together mine for the spooky season. And I realized that I actually have read a good amount of books. I'm looking at them, they're all laid out on the floor in front of me. And I just want to recommend them to you in case you want to pick one of these up and put them on your list of books to read this year. So let's just dive right in, start building your TBR for September. The first one I have to recommend you is actually, it's kind of like an OG. It's an OG book, at least for me. I actually found this book from an old booktuber. I can't even find her channel anymore. I don't remember her name. I think her name was Mary. And I watched all of her videos back in like 2016, 2017. And she recommended Stolen Songbird by Danielle L. Jensen. You probably recognize this author's name now from the Bridge Kingdom series, but this was like her main, or I guess not her main, but like her first series that made her popular. It's a YA paranormal fantasy, and it follows this girl, Cecile, in this kind of French-inspired fantasy world. And for 500 years, this witch's curse has kept these like evil trolls underneath a mountain. But she gets trapped under the mountain, and the trolls are relying on her to break the curse, but not everything is as it seems. She's trying to escape. It's a romance, it's an enemies to lovers. The trolls are not like ugly, trolls that you like would normally think of. From here, the book kind of expands and the world expands and you explore new places. It's a trilogy. I loved it. I cried at the end of the trilogy. I still haven't read the prequel book, but I do have it. So yeah, Stolen Songbird. It's an OG one. It's not smutty though. If you're thinking Danielle L. Jensen, Bridge Kingdom, like it's not smutty like that, but there is, romance. I just want to get this next one out of the way because it's kind of a given at this point, but I can't not say it because it's my favorite paranormal fantasy romance, and that would be, oh, they're out of order, The Kingdom of the Wicked series by Carrie Maniscalco, and I cannot wait for her upcoming release of, oh god, she has a new book coming out this fall, and I'm so excited. It'll take us back to this world and it follows another character. Kind of interesting with this one because I didn't really love the first book, and you can see I tabbed it with like things that I was kind of annoyed about. And then I moved into book 2 and book 3, and I mean, Daddy Wrath. I love Daddy Wrath. I love Amelia in this book. And the first one starts off with this girl, Amelia, in an Italian-inspired fantasy setting. She is investigating the murder of her twin sister, a very gruesome murder, and demons become involved, monsters become involved. There's a priest, there's this like very scary church that's like covered in bones with corpses and stuff, which is actually based on a real church in Italy. Very interesting, but they like bake cannoli, so it has lots of cozy kind of atmospheric vibes. And then in book 2, we get to travel to, is it a spoiler? It might be a spoiler. You get to travel outside of that world, and there are some sexy demons. That's all I'm gonna say. Just go read it. Looking at my pile here, I've got a lot of newer releases to talk about. So where do I begin? Let's start with this one, The High Mountain Court by A.K. Mulford. I read this last month. This is just like a solid, witchy, traveling fantasy story. It feels kind of like your bread and butter fantasy. It's nothing like crazy unique or new. So I don't want to like tell you that this is the best book ever, but it's a good book. And if you're looking for enemies to lover with some like magical objects, a journey, a kind of mystery setting, but it's not like too mysterious. They just have to like solve something, you know. It's really good. It's good for that. This has fae, and it also has witches that have different magical powers, and their powers and like who they are is determined by what color magic they have. So you're following a red witch in this world, and red witches were hunted down and killed off, and so you're following Remy, who's been in hiding this whole time, and that's where I'm going to leave you with it. I think you kind of get the gist. It's your classic fae, enemies to lovers kind of setting. I will move on to book 2. I'm excited to read that this fall. I just need to pick it up. I own book 3 next to me. Then let's just quickly chat about my recent favorite, Fortuna Sworn by KJ Sutton. Oh my god, I loved this book so much. We're not going to talk about book 2, which I had a lot of issues with. If you've seen in my July wrap up, I was like, is this the same author? We're gonna just talk about book 1 because it was so good and juicy and I ate it up. It's dark, it's adult, there's a lot of trigger warnings. It starts off with Fortuna Sworn, who is kind of like in hiding. She's a special kind of creature. This is a paranormal urban fantasy, so it's our world, but you have vampires and you have fairies and fae and witches and, you know, any kind of creature you can think of, they exist in this world. And she gets caught and is being like human trafficked. She's being trafficked. Oh god. You know what I'm saying, okay? And this man essentially rescues her, and then from there, you kind of find out who he is, and their lives become entangled. She gets taken to the land of the fae, but then you also have these side plots of her like working at a diner and just like trying to make a living in the real world. Her brother has been missing and she just wants to help her brother. So that is the kind of driving force behind book 1. I'll leave it with you there. There's some good stuff. Yeah. That's all I'm gonna say, because we're not gonna talk about book 2. I'm hoping book 3 is better. Book 1 though, thumbs up. While we're on the topic of some of my most recent reads and also adult books, I have to recommend to you A Broken Blade by Melissa Blair. This has kind of been blowing up recently on Bookstagram, and I know it's been blown up on Book Talk, but I'm not like big on Book Talk. I don't spend a lot of my time there. I'm usually here on YouTube looking for book recommendations, but you might have seen this around. This is like adult Throne of Glass with a little sprinkling of Lord of the Rings. You have Kira, who is the king's blade. She is his most prized assassin, but she's a halfling, so she's, well, I'm not going to tell you what she is because she doesn't really know what she is, but you have like humans and you have fae and you have elves, and in this world, the humans, the mortals, rule it, and elves have been like wiped out, and then you have fae. They have this tiny little pocket up in the corner of the map, and she is supposed to just basically kill her own people. She's supposed to kill anyone that the king says for her to kill. There's enemies to lover, true enemies to lovers in here, all right? You've got a man who comes from a non-mortal background, and it's really good. There's a lot of tropes that are done really well in here, like your classic fantasy romance, but also there's some heavier stuff like abuse and alcoholism and addiction that are explored. So kind of real topics for us. But anyway, Kira learns the truth and has to do something about it, all right? And also, I like that she's older. She's like 30 years old in this book, but like in this world, everyone lives longer, so she's actually 60 years old, but like if you were to put her in terms of like what we would understand, she'd be like 30. So, you know, she's like a full woman. She's been through shit. I like that. The next one I want to talk about is one I read last fall, and I loved it. Now, I have to be honest with you, I don't remember like all of the plot details, so I might have to read a summary online before I read book 2, but what I remember was very good, and I think I gave it like 4.5 stars, and that would be Violet Made of Thorns by Gina Chen. I love this fairy loot edition. This follows a witch who, she's like property of the king, basically, and she just kind of bullshits prophecies. She's just trying to make a living and just like keep her head down and just do her job. And she has this kind of, I don't know if they're enemies, but they like don't get along. Her and the Prince Cyrus. And the king says that she has to prophesize a true, beautiful love story for the prince at the upcoming ball, because the kingdom kind of depends on him finding, you know, a future partner. But instead of prophesizing this. She ends up like awakening this deadly curse that could damn the entire kingdom. And there's just like witty banter, and at the same time she has these growing feelings for the prince, and I really enjoyed it. It's YA, but it didn't feel like super young when I read it, and I'll definitely read the sequel. So good witchy ambiance vibes in this one. I don't know why I keep saying ambiance. Can a book have ambiance? Right, looking at my pile here, what do I want to talk about next? You know what? We're going to talk about it. I almost didn't put this one in the pile because I thought people are going to kind of feel like they've already seen this book around, or they just don't like this book or this author. But you know what? I'm going to include it because I really liked it. And this is my video and I want to talk about it. It's From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout. Okay, hear me out with this one. I hear a lot of hate on this book because people are like, oh, it's so predictable, it's enemies to lovers, and you can see the plot twist coming. Yeah, that's why I freaking liked it. I loved that it gave me what I wanted. I wanted enemies to lovers. Not me talking for 30 minutes, not realizing that my camera ran out of space. Let's talk about these books. We were on, when we last chatted, From Blood and Ash. Let me tell you why I like this book, okay? I already said, what did I say? Let me tell you, I like the predictability of this book. You get the good tropes. You get the fantasy enemies to lovers. You get the like maiden, pure, innocent trope. You get the bodyguard trope. You get this predictable ending that was everything I wanted it to be. It has like, I think, are they fae? I can't remember if they're fae or not, but like magical beings. And then you get werewolves and you get vampires, and it's just, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. Book 2 is a little bit tougher to get into. I am though on book 3 and I need to pick that up. It's been like 2 years, maybe? I don't know. But From Blood and Ash, just, okay. If you like the things I like. Right, what did we talk about next? Oh, we talked about, well, I talked to no one, about House of Salt and Sorrows by Erin A. Craig. Now, I made a like vibe reel, aesthetic reel for this book last fall when I read it. So I'm gonna pop this up on the screen and you can have a watch because I just, yeah, this is what this book is. It's a 12 Dancing Princesses gothic retelling set in like a fantasy world, but it's at sea. And she really leans into the sea, ocean, scenery, and aesthetic. There's a mystery, and I like that the mystery plot is like the driving plot, and the romance is like kind of trailing it. It's not the main plot of the book. It's a very kind of creepy 12 Dancing Princesses retelling. I really liked it. It's a standalone, and she has another book coming out this fall, so I'm definitely gonna pick that one up. I'll pop it up on the screen. Looking at the cover for her new book, it's clearly a sequel, so correcting myself, it's no longer a standalone. I always thought it was a standalone. Maybe it originally was, I don't know, but it's not. But yeah, if you haven't read this, it's good. If you haven't followed me for a while, then you will have seen in the last year, I have read all of Laura Thalassa's books. So we have Rhapsodic, which is the first one in her Bargainer series, and then we have her new series. This just came out in May, I think it was, Bewitched. Okay, I loved Rhapsodic. I loved book 1. You're following Callie, she's a siren, and it's an urban paranormal fantasy world. Laura Thalassa, both of these like are set in the same world that she's created, I guess. This girl Callie makes deals with the Bargainer, and he comes to collect them one day. It's a dark, adult, steamy book. The one thing that I will say that I like had to kind of look past was her age in this book. She's like 16 or 17. She's like not quite 18. I just wish Laura Thalassa just, you know, made her 18 so you can kind of get over the predatory vibes that potentially this could create, and I know has created for some of you. So I had to look past that, but I really enjoyed this story. Moving into the rest of the series is kind of been an adventure in itself, but like if you're looking for a dark adult kind of taboo enemies to lovers paranormal romance, like do this one, read this one. And then you've got Bewitched, which if you watched my reading vlog for this, I didn't like it. I didn't like it because I don't think it was executed well, but I really like the story and I will continue on with it when she comes out with book 2. You're following this girl who just wants to get into this witch academy. It's like Hogwarts, okay, but just for witches, but she is not allowed in because her powers, every time she uses them, she loses her memory, and it's a problem. But they say, okay, you have to do this like epic quest, and complete this quest, you can come and join our academy and train here and study here. So she does that, but then she ends up accidentally awakening this ancient god, Memnon, who's been dead for like 2,000 plus years. Okay, the thing I didn't like about this book was there are a lot of like gaping plot holes, especially pertaining to Memnon, like how he woke up after 2,000 years, then like went from Brazil all the way to California. Like, how did the dude learn what an airplane was? Where did he find money or jeans? You know, things like that. I was like, can you explain it a little bit better? But the story itself is fun and I will pick it up. So if you're looking for, you know, Witch Academy vibes, here's one for you. And then I did read this book in April and I was surprised that it came out like when it did this year because it definitely fits the October time. And that would be Foxglove King by Hannah Whitman. This is technically adult, but it reads like YA, which is confusing to me because Kingdom of the Wicked series is YA, but like super smutty. This doesn't have any smut. It's not like that at all. I think there's a lot of tension building and it could come in future books. So if you're going in looking for like, you know, smut scenes, you're not going to find this here. But I really enjoyed this one. It's a fun, like solid 4.5 star fantasy romance. It is similar to Throne of Glass. And I know I say that a lot. I'm like, oh, it's adult Throne of Glass. But like, no, truly the plot for book 1 of Throne of Glass is similar to this. You've got this girl who needs to go to this castle. There's kind of a love triangle. There's a mystery involved. It's gothic. There's death magic. There's this whole mystery aspect. I think I just mentioned that. I really enjoyed it. And I have this beautiful edition. Look at this. Got some art. Look at that. Yeah. So pretty. So yeah, Foxglove King. We'll definitely read the sequel. Recommend. Sticking with the gothic witch vibes, I have to talk about Vespertine by Margaret Rogerson, one of my favorite authors of all time. She is very good at writing short fantasy stories. Like, she's written 2 other standalone fantasies. This one, though, I think is the start of a series. I think this is book 1 in a trilogy, I believe. So this one deals with sinister saints, evil spirits. This girl, what is her name? Artemisa? Yeah, I think it's Artemisa. Yeah, Artemisa is training to be a Grey Sister. So she's like this nun who cleanses the body of the dead and like sends their souls away. And this evil soul ends up like coming to power. Her convent is attacked by possessed soldiers and she ends up like saving everyone because she awakens an ancient saint's relic, which is like a big no-no. She ends up finding help with the last person that she thought she could ever find help with, which is a malevolent, evil being. This is like the perfect book to read when it's like thunderstorming at night in the fall when it's cold. Speaking of Margaret Rogerson, I love all of her books, so I decided to include one more, Sorcery of Thorns. I've talked about this book a lot. This is about a girl named Elizabeth who is training to be this librarian who takes care of magical grimoires, and these grimoires like have personalities, which is so much fun. Like, I love an animated object. Think of like the Monster Book of Monsters from Harry Potter, but like thousands of books have their own personalities in this ancient library, and she has been trained to believe that all sorcerers are evil. When one of the library's most evil books ends up being like released to the wild, she has to team up with a sorcerer to like defeat this book and like figure out what's going on behind the scenes and like who can she trust. And she has this very witty sorcerer that she's living with, Nathaniel, and he's just like so grumpy all the time. I love him. He's just so annoyed about everything, but you know, reluctantly lets Elizabeth into his life. This is a standalone fantasy. Please read it. It's perfect for the fall. This next one is perfect for my historical fantasy lovers. We have got Grave Mercy by Robin Lefevre. This is book 1 in her trilogy called His Fair Assassins, and each book follows a different girl that comes from the same place. This is following Ismay. She's 17 years old and she's a handmaiden to Death. She has been gifted these powers from Death himself, and in order to save lives, she needs to take them. She's essentially an assassin. She ends up having to travel to Brittany, France, and pose as a mistress to this evil man. She finds herself really unprepared for love and for dangerous games. This one's particularly really cool because I've never heard about or read about or researched this situation or this time period, and I'm a big fan of deep diving into historical events on Wikipedia and historical people. Yeah, so there's a really cool author's note in the back. I'll read you a little bit so you can kind of get the vibe. The political intrigue and switching alliances in this book are historically accurate. The major historical events and people in Grave Mercy are based off of true events, from a 12-year-old inheriting the Duchess of Brittany to her having been betrothed to at least half a dozen suitors in return for the aid in Duke Francis II's ongoing struggle with France. The treaty is real. It's really cool that she went back to the 1400s. Is it? Yeah, I think it's the 1400s. 1485 for this book. So I recommend it. I really liked book 1, and I did start book 2, but I haven't finished it, so maybe I need to do that this fall. The last book we're gonna talk about today that I have to recommend to you is Belladonna by Adeline Grace. You probably have heard this book. It's been floating around since it came out. Its sequel, Foxglove, is also coming out this fall, so I'm definitely reading that. So Signa is an orphan. This is a gothic fantasy book, so of course she goes to stay with the Hawthorns at Thorn Manor. The Hawthorn is just always the name in a gothic book. Am I wrong? Anyway, she ends up seeing this spirit who claims that she was poisoned, and that's how she died. And so she ends up trying to unravel this mystery and getting sucked into all of this stuff that she really didn't want to be involved in. And she allies with Death himself to solve this mystery. And Death potentially could be a love interest, which is interesting. I had so much fun with this one. It's a YA book, but reads really easily. It's not, on the younger end of YA. Super fun. So yeah, pick it up. Here's my little stack of recommendations for you. I hope you found something. If you've already seen these books, I hope it's given you a little nudge to pick one. If you have any paranormal fantasy recommendations for me, please share. I have, an ongoing list of 100 books that I hope to get to. This is kind of the majority of a vibe that I read throughout the year anyway, so I'm always looking for this kind of genre. If it's enemies to lovers, if it's paranormal, has fae, witches, I will read it. Vampires, I'm telling you, from Blood and Ash. Okay, I know it gets a lot of hype, but I really like it. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you so much for watching. Drop a vampire emoji down below so I can thank you in the comments, and tell me what paranormal being you would be if you could be one. I think for me, I would definitely be a witch of some kind. Definitely be a witch. I didn't even talk about Sarah J. Maas books in this, but there are witches in Sarah J. Maas books, and there are also paranormal fantasy romance. If you haven't read them, pick them up, but I'm sure you have. Anyway, yeah, that's all I have to say. Thanks so much for watching. Okay, bye.